Thank you so much for joining us for CBN NewsWatch. I'm Ephraim Graham. Ahead today, a growing threat in the Middle East from Islamic forces with Christians and democracy under fire in a key region in Syria. We're going to also hear how the people in the region are asking for help from other countries, especially the U.S. and Israel, so they can defend themselves. Can the peaceful speeches coming from the new Islamic leader of Syria be trusted? We're going to hear from an expert who says the U.S. must be on its guard. And the FBI will soon have new leadership as the current director resigns 3 years before his term is up after President-elect Donald Trump says he'll appoint a new leader for the Bureau. All those stories and more are ahead today, right now on CBN NewsWatch.
This is CBN NewsWatch.
We begin in the Middle East, where one area in Syria could be the new ground zero in a battle between Islamic forces and democratic values, as a democratic government and Christians and others in the region are under fire. And there is concern those Islamic dangers could spread. Chris Mitchell brings us the story now. He's reporting from Jerusalem.
While the leader of the main faction of Syria's rebel forces is pledging no new war, a democratic enclave in northeast Syria that's home to Kurds, Yazidis and Christians is being attacked by a proxy army of Turkey. CBN News spoke with a Christian from northeast Syria by phone. To protect his identity, we've disguised his voice and can't show his face. We're calling him Gabriel.
So, yeah, we are under attack, and we don't think that Erdogan and his proxies are going to stop in this place in the north.
The autonomous administration in northeast Syria is unique in all of the Middle East. CBN News reported on this new government back in this 2019 report.
It's completely new in the Middle East, and I'd say it's completely new in the whole world.
Freelance journalist Carlos Zurituza has covered this new government for several years.
What these people are actually doing is rebuilding themselves, starting from scratch after decades of repression by the Assad regime. So literally from day one, since 2012, since they liberated their territories, they are in the process of reconstructing civil society, integrating different components in the region, not just Kurds, it's Arabs, Armenians, Syriacs.
During the war to defeat ISIS, the autonomous administration partnered with the U.S. and allied forces.
They are more similar in human rights to what we believe in the West, and critically, they have freedom of religion and belief and an overrepresentation of religious minorities. So what's happened is they stand in direct opposition to these jihadi Islamist groups, HTS and SNA. And so today we are seeing the SNA is being used as the militia to break down and attack northeast Syria.
The autonomous administration fears the Turkish government of President Erdogan, who has stated his intention to defeat the Kurds of northeast Syria. Given the attacks by Turkish-backed forces and Erdogan's threats, the people of northeast Syria are calling out to the U.S., the West, and the Christian world for help.
We call on all the Christians in the world to call their nations and brothers and sisters in their administration to make the Christian, the Kurds and Turks and all minorities to be able to protect themselves from these kind of atrocities.
Gabriel says northeast Syria is not asking for foreign troops, but for the resources to defend themselves.
Especially the Trump administration and the Israeli government to make this happen, because Christians all over Syria, Christians all over Lebanon, all over Iraq, they want to survive.
Heading believes it's important to pray for this fledgling Middle East democracy.
Because in this area, you have people who can believe whatever they want. Christians, Yazidis, even Muslim background believers who have come to faith in Jesus are able to practice their religion in this area. So pray for northeast Syria, that it'll remain stable and that the international community would stand and back northeast Syria against these Islamist jihadis.
And Chris Mitchell joins us right now to dive a little bit deeper. So, Chris, are any countries taking any steps to protect these Christians and this democratic region?
Well, Ephraim, right now we know that the U.S. has a presence there. The question is, when President Trump gets in there after January 20th, will he want to remain there? And will he understand that what this autonomous administration really represents in the region? It is a bulwark against Turkey's imperialist and Islamist plans for many of these Islamist groups. It is a refuge for Christians and these other minorities. One of the only democracies in the Middle East. You heard our, guest there talking about the good governance, representation from all sectors of society. They actually have mandatory representation by women up to 40%, but Turkey is setting its sights on it to take over because they want a greater Turkey and they want to take over more of Syria, and this area is standing in the way.
So could these forces attacking the Christians also threaten Israel and other countries at some point?
Well, right now we're talking about the Syrian National Army. It's a misnomer because it's backed by Turkey. They certainly represent a threat to northeast Syria. But if they allied with these other major group, HTS, they could threaten Jordan. They could threaten northern Iraq as well, all with the aid of Turkey. Israel might be too far away for them, but if they allied with these other groups, it possibly could attack Israel. But I think right now, and I think that's the kind of language you're hearing from the HTS government or representatives, that they want to consolidate their gains right now inside Syria, establish themselves, and then probably go to their greater their goals.
What do we know about the Israeli military positions inside Syria?
Well, really, it's a kind of a historic game changer. I'll show you the cover of the Jerusalem Post today. Ephraim, you see two soldiers standing on Mount Hermon, and this is the strategic part of Mount Hermon. It's the Syrian part, which really dominates the whole region. Now, Israel had controlled some of that Mount Hermon, but now the Syrian army, several days ago, when the army just simply imploded, they left their sites and the IDF has taken over. From this vantage point, they can see all the way to Damascus, and now they not only control that Syrian part of Mount Hermon, but also this 1974 buffer zone that was established between Israel and Syria after the 1973 Yom Kippur War. Israel has taken that over. And then in the meantime, as we've reported, the IDF has destroyed most of Assad's military infrastructure, up to 80% of that. And so they're really being proactive to prevent these Islamic groups from getting their hand on any of these sophisticated weapons by the Assad regime.
What can you tell us about the leader of the Islamic rebels in Syria?
Well, it's Abu Mohammed al-Juhani. He's the leader. He was the leader of al-Qaeda in Iraq, arrested by the U.S. troops in 2006. That's where he met the head of ISIS, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. Then in 2011, he was sent to Syria, and he started a group called Jabhat al-Nusra. Then he was tried to be recruited by ISIS. He stayed with al-Qaeda, and he started his own group in 2016, the one we know now as HTS. The main goal he has is to defeat Assad and topple the Syrian regime. Obviously, he's done that. In the meantime, before this, he controlled a mini-state in Syria called Idlib. It was run by Sharia law. It was basically a mini-state, about 500 million people. But in there, he was accused of silencing opposition, targeting journalists. And his original name, by the way, Ephraim, is Ahmed al-Hussein al-Shara. That's his original name. He changed his name to Golani after the Golan Heights. So his idea, his goal is to liberate something called al-Sham. Al-Sham in Islam means Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, and Israel. So he has a greater goal than just the Assad regime. And he did this all with the help of Turkish President Erdogan.
The Wall Street Journal is reporting Hamas is making concessions on Israeli demands for a ceasefire, and that is raising hopes for a hostage deal. What are some of the details, and is the Israeli government optimistic about a potential agreement?
I think they are optimistic, Ephraim. At least that's kind of what we've been hearing in the news. Some of the details, Hamas is yielding perhaps on two key Israeli demands. One, they will allow Israeli forces to remain in Gaza temporarily after the fighting stops. Number two, it released a list of hostages it would release under a ceasefire. Hamas hasn't done that before. It would be a 60-day ceasefire, release up to 30 hostages, including U.S. hostages, in exchange for some Palestinian prisoners, more humanitarian aid. Netanyahu said there were certain developments, but he said it was too early to tell if a deal was possible.
All right, our CBN News Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell, thank you so much as always for your insights. Stay safe and know that many people are praying for you and our staff there in Israel. Coming up, an expert here in the United States also has a warning about the leader of the Islamic rebel forces in Syria and why the U.S. needs to be careful about his talk of peace. We're going to hear from him when we come back. You're watching CBN NewsWatch. Syria's new interim leader, Mohammed al-Golani, is a former member of al-Qaeda, and he's pledged to the establishment of the ISIS caliphate. Can Golani be trusted, or does danger lurk behind his peaceful and unifying rhetoric? Appearing on this week's episode of The Global Lane, Middle East Forum Director Gregg Roman contends the United States must remain vigilant.
I think we have to be very cautious and careful about the fact that a so-called former al-Qaeda operative, the head of al-Qaeda's divisional command in Syria, who was actually dispatched there by Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, the now dead head and founder of the Islamic State, is claiming to want peace. I think that his words versus the actions on the grounds have to be carefully criticized and analyzed insofar as it relates that there's a very different fabric of what's going on in the day-to-day operations now in post-Assad Syria, rather than what his missives may suggest otherwise.
Well, how about Syria's Christian community? Many are saying they're fine for now. They're not suffering atrocities yet. They're concerned for the future. How concerned should they be?
So there is something to be given that HTS, when it was ruling just Idlib, which is the sliver of Syrian territory that it's controlled for the past 13 years in the northwest of the country, went so far as to have Islamist-run ministries encourage Christians to celebrate Christmas, Easter, and other holidays, especially from the Syriac Orthodox churches that were active in that province. But now that they've moved from a rebel group to taking full control, or almost full control, of all Syrian territory west of the Euphrates River, and even have gone so far as to try and bring the top bishop from Aleppo to speak on their behalf. I'm not sure if they're going to keep on carrying out these type of propaganda-like exercises, considering the fact that they're on their way to establish an Islamic State in Syria.
So we've got to look at their past and look what they've done in Idlib and elsewhere. And how about Israel? Now, they've received international criticism for taking out Syrian naval ships in Latakia and destroying chemical weapons facilities near Damascus, even sending troops over the border into Syria from the Golan. So did those actions violate international law? How important was it for Israel to take those measures?
I think anyone looking at a clear-eyed view of what is happening now in Syria in a post-Assad regime, and even reports that have come out from the Ministry of Intelligence and the Ministry of the Interior in Syria, leaked documents that were actually put on Twitter this week, show that there was sort of a Faustian bargain between Israel and Assad prior to his fall, in which Israel agreed for Syria to have a certain amount of arms to be able to fight back against the insurgency, which has now completely conquered the territory, as I said beforehand, west of the Euphrates. But that was in exchange for it trying to provide Israel with backgrounders information on weapons transports that were being sent from Iran into Iraq through Syria and then to Hezbollah. Now that that bargain is officially over, Israel had to invoke Article 51 of the United Nations Charter, its right to self-defense, and take out any strategic weaponry that, God forbid, would fall into the hands of the Islamist mercenaries and the Islamist rebels, which have now taken over Damascus. Israel was well within its international rights to destroy any weaponry which new forces that it does not have an agreement with would be able to use to target Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, and Haifa. I think it was completely justified, and the international community is acting like a peanut gallery, not understanding Israel's true security needs.
Yeah, I can't imagine HTS with a Navy and also with chemical weapons. Can you?
No, not at all. And it's not just Israeli forces which have been on the lookout for this. There are reports of American intelligence provision to its Kurdish allies in the SDF, for members of the Druze communities in Swaya in southern Syria on the northern Golan Heights, but on the Syrian side of the Golan Heights, helping provide information on the whereabouts this area. And even we have reports of a top Syrian chemist being assassinated in the neighborhoods of Damascus. So I think Israel is going to its full extent to not just eliminate the apparatus, which was Syria's chemical weapons program, but also all those who have the know-how and the knowledge to reactivate it under an HTS regime.
Okay, now Turkey has supported HTS and another group, the SNA, which is really the Turkish surrogate army battling Kurdish forces in northeast Syria. So to what extent should the U.S. get involved to help our Kurdish allies? After all, I mean, you remember they helped Donald Trump and the United States eliminate the ISIS threat. They destroyed the Islamic Caliphate. So what should we do about it?
I think it's come to recognize the U.S. policy should call for a semi-autonomous or maybe completely autonomous region of Rojava, or that of the Kurdish enclave, which is east of the Euphrates River in northeast Syria. And if the U.S. is not willing to back its Kurdish allies, what kind of message does that send to other American allies throughout the rest of the world, which have fought hand in glove with American forces on the ground in areas which have posed a threat to U.S. national security interests? As it relates to Turkey, this is the Ottomanization of Erdogan's grand vision to cast the Sunni Pale to replace the Shia Crescent, which is now dissolving as Iran is kicked out of the greater Arabic-speaking Middle East. And I think the U.S. has to be very careful in terms of dealing with the SNA, with HTS, and any other force which may come to power in Damascus. It should be U.S. policy to back its allies to the hilt. And right now, Erdogan is not acting like an American ally insofar as he's supporting, arming, and giving logistics and intelligence to a force which is trying to wipe out the Kurdish presence in Syria.
Middle East Forum Director Gregg Roman, thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Gary.
Also on this week's episode of The Global Lane, the Trump agenda and the chances some of his more controversial cabinet picks will be approved by the Senate. And a look at American colleges and universities underreporting hundreds of millions of dollars in foreign donations. You can see it all on The Global Lane tonight on the CBN News Channel. It begins at 8 Eastern. You can also see it on the CBN News app or on YouTube. Still ahead, here at home, the FBI will soon have a new director as current leader Christopher Wray is stepping down following President-elect Donald Trump's announcement of a new choice to lead the Bureau. We're going to bring you the story. It's coming right after this. FBI Director Christopher Wray will step down before President-elect Donald Trump takes office in January, 3 years before his term expires. Trump put the pressure on him to leave by naming his own choice to lead the agency. His nominee, Kash Patel, has promised to radically clean house and restore trust in the Bureau. CBN's George Thomas is on this story.
Wray's decision to resign before the end of his tenure term is no surprise to some lawmakers, especially after President Trump nominated a new leader at the agency.
I think once the president indicated that he would prefer to have someone else, I think Chris Wray decided that this was the appropriate time for him to step away.
Wray, appointed by Trump in 2017, faced considerable criticism from the former president, particularly following the FBI's raid on Trump's Mar-a-Lago residence in 2022 during an investigation into classified documents. The resignation of Christopher Wray is a great day for America, Trump wrote on Truth Social. Wray's tenure also involved high-profile investigations that led to 2 indictments against Trump.
I think he sees that President Trump both appointed him to that role, but has also lost trust for him.
With Wray stepping down, attention has turned to Kash Patel, Trump's nominee to replace him.
Mr. Patel, will you be independent as an FBI director, or will you take President Trump's orders?
The 44-year-old Patel made the rounds on Capitol Hill Monday to secure support ahead of tough confirmation hearings. Patel has been a fierce critic of the FBI, suggesting that he would shrink its power, close its D.C. headquarters, and radically overhaul the department. Before his nomination, Patel was asked by Fox News how he would restore trust in the FBI and DOJ.
One thing. Exposure of corruption. Put out the documents, put out the evidence. We only have gotten halfway down the Russiagate hole. The people need to know that their FBI is restored by knowing full well what they did to unlawfully surveil them.
Trump and many conservatives believe the FBI and Department of Justice are weaponized against Republicans and those who hold conservative values. Patel has promised to tackle what he perceives as a deep state against Trump.
Patel is somebody who has a very different vision for the Bureau than Wray. He's talked openly about his desire to rid the government of, quote, conspirators against Donald Trump. He said that that could include going after the media or people in government who are perceived as having been disloyal.
Kash met with Senator John Cornyn of Texas, who said he'd be inclined to back his nomination.
I want to make sure that we restore the reputation of these agencies, these departments like the FBI and the Department of Justice and the intelligence community, that we restore their reputation as non-political institutions.
George Thomas, CBN News.
And we're back with an encouraging word for your Thursday. Stay with us. Time now for your Thursday Thankful. I trust you'll join me in this prayer of gratitude. God, I thank you for the things I so easily take for granted. I'm breathing. My eyes are open. I can walk. I can talk. I'm warm. I am alive. Thank you. I ask for nothing in this moment. I simply say thank you. That will do it for this edition of CBN NewsWatch. You can always find more of our programs on the CBN News channel at any time. You can also find them online. That address is cbnnews.com. We'd love to know what you think about the stories you've seen here today. You can email us, newswatch@cbn.com, and then come on back and join us right back here, same time tomorrow. Goodbye and God bless.